So, back in 2014, I was in a rush to move to another apartment, and there were not many available for the time frame I wanted it, at least not any good apartments, and definitely not in good areas. I finally found a nice decent apartment with 3 rooms and moved in for the time being. At least I had a place to live in while I could search for a better one. The suite was newly renovated, so I was supposed to get new appliances as well. There had been a mistake with the fridge, and the landlord told me that they would replace it. They also said they were going to do this ASAP because I was going to be moving in within 2 weeks. About a month later, I get a knock on the door. I went to look out at the peephole and saw a man standing there with a piece of paper in his hand, and another man behind him. "Fridge," the man said from behind the door. I opened the door and saw the 2 men. The first man was the delivery guy. Behind him stood a man who didn't really care about his appearance, and honestly looked like he had just crawled out of a dumpster. I thought he was just a helper. I left the man and let him walk inside and place the fridge in the kitchen. The greasy man followed him inside and introduced himself to me. "I am the new landlord," he said with a smile. "Really, where did the old one go?" I said. I was a bit startled as he looked like a frickin' homeless guy. "Who the hell hired him?" "Oh, she doesn't work here anymore," he said. Well, no shit, I thought. The delivery guy then said bye and left, but the landlord didn't. "Where are your parents?" he said to me. I told him that I lived alone. This was a big mistake. "No way, you look like you're about 15 years old," he said to me with a big smile on his face. "Yeah, I get that a lot." "Why do you need a place this big for?" he asked me. I just told him that I'd temporarily moved here. He walked over into the kitchen to start opening and closing the fridge door. "Just checking if everything is good," he said. I just nodded and leaned against the wall and watched him. He then just stood there, looking at the fridge and then back at me. He doesn't leave. What's wrong with him? I thought to myself. Then he said, "You're really cute. Look at you just standing there. You're so cute." I let out a laugh and thanked him. No red flags yet. He then said, "I live on the first floor, so if you ever want to just hang out." I didn't know how to answer him. I don't. Before I could say another word, he interrupted me. "I have no friends and I don't really talk to my family. I'm super lonely." Okay, now red flags were going off. I said to him, why didn't he talk to his family? He brushed it off as he then changed the topic quickly. Then he started walking to the door and repeated himself once again. "Don't forget, first floor. Don't be a stranger." I followed him to the door and let him out, and then I locked it. I felt a bit uncomfortable but soon forgot about it. About 3 days later, I get a phone call from a place that I had applied to. I had landed a part-time job at Best Buy. This was my second job since I already had a job at an insurance company. I was very excited to work there. I was hired in the tech department and I love computers. Before I go on, I worked Monday to Friday 9 to 5 at the insurance place, then 3 days a week at Best Buy. Mostly working in the evenings, but it varied on weekends. So on the first day, I headed out of my apartment, took the elevator down and was about to exit the front door when I heard that same voice again. "Hey." It was the landlord. "Hey, what's up?" I replied. "Not much. Where you going?" he said back to me. I ignored his question and just told him that I needed to go, and then walked out of the door. I didn't need to drive to work because Best Buy was only walking distance away. Literally 3 minutes into my walk, I noticed a grey car driving very slowly next to me. I glanced over and guess who it was? The landlord. He rolled down the passenger side window. "Where you going?" I told him that I was on my way to work and that I was going to be late if I continued chatting. I said bye and continued walking even faster. "Wait, let me take you. Where do you work?" "No, it's alright. It's not that far away. I just work at Best Buy. I'll walk." I know, this was another dumb mistake. I shouldn't have told him where I worked. "Come on, let me take you." I thought to myself, he's going in the same direction, and I hesitated for a bit but then accepted his offer. I know, getting into his car was very dumb of me. It was a very short ride, but he did not fail to make me feel uncomfortable. When I finally got to my work parking lot, I thanked him and reached for the door to open it, but it didn't open. "Hey, your door's locked." Oh yeah, I have a habit to lock doors. "Before I let you go, can you give me your number, please?" I lied and told him that my phone wasn't working and I was just using it as an iPod. My phone wasn't on vibrate and I was hoping to God that I didn't get a text or something. "Okay then, let me give you my number." He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote it down. "Give me a call, okay?" "Yeah, sure," I replied. "When are you going to call me then?" He replied. "I don't know, I'll call you when I get a chance, okay?" I said. "Wait, what time are you done? I'll pick you up." "I don't know, it's my first day. I don't know how long that I'm going to be there for." I was hoping that he would fall for my lie. He unlocked the doors and I stepped out of the car and I thanked him again and walked towards the store. Before leaving, he once again shouted, "Don't forget to call me," and then drove past. Jesus, what a creep that guy is. I threw the little piece of paper with his number on it out and forgot about the whole situation. The next day I was a little scared to take the elevator since he always happened to be everywhere I was going, so I decided to take the stairs. It led to the back door and I was sure I wouldn't see him. I did this about 4 days in a row and never saw him again. Great, this works, I thought. On the 4th night, I was sitting in my living room watching videos on my laptop. It was around 10:30 and I was kind of dozing off when I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Who could it be? I sat down and didn't move, hoping that they'd just go away. Then there was another knock. I tiptoed to the door and looked through the peephole. And it was the landlord once again. "Hey, you there? Open up." Confused and tired, I opened the door. The conversation went as followed. "Hey, what's up? Where the hell have you been?" "What do you mean?" "I don't see you leave for work anymore. Did you quit or something?" "No, I still go to work. I just have this weird schedule." "You never called me. I was waiting for your call. You never called me, you promised." "Sorry, I never got the chance to. I work 2 jobs, so I'm pretty busy." "I came to your work and asked for you. They told me that no one by the name of what you gave me worked there. Did you lie to me? Did you lie to me about your name?" I was caught off guard. I didn't know what to tell him. I had indeed lied to him about my name, but that wasn't what freaked me out. Why the hell had he gone over to my work? You went to my work? Why?" I asked him nervously. "Because I didn't see you around. I wanted to know where you were," he said irritatedly. I didn't respond. He then just stared at me, hoping that I was going to invite him in or something. "I'm really tired. I need to work tomorrow. I'll see you around." "Look, I need to talk to you. Can we talk?" "Honestly, I am really tired right now. Can this wait?" "Whatever, I'm fine." he said while walking away, still muttering under his breath. I shut the door and stayed up for a bit, afraid that he would come back. Luckily, he did not return and I could finally go to sleep. Another day of slavery was awaiting me the next day, so the next day came. I got ready for work again and decided to take the elevator. The elevator door was open, and guess who was in there? Yep. He asked me if I needed a ride and I said no, and he made sure that I definitely didn't, and I said no again. I then got out of the elevator and went to work. This went on for months. By this time, I had already mentioned him to my manager and all my co-workers. They had told me that if I didn't show up to work someday, they were going to call the police for me. Sometimes he'd see me out of the main door and he would drop everything he was doing to come straight after me, asking if I wanted a ride. Other times he would ask if we could hang out, if he could take me on a date. Knocking on my door at the middle of night was a pretty common occurrence at this point. One time, he was in the middle of a conversation with another tenant. The tenant was complaining about something that had broken his suite and that he needed him to fix it. The landlord told the tenant that he should go to his apartment and he should get all of his tools and follow quickly after. The tenant left, but he never went to get his tools. Instead, he followed me outside and offered me a ride once again. I told him no, and that he needed to do his job and help the tenant. He said he didn't care whatsoever about that tenant, and that he just wanted to be around me. This creeped me out, of course. I would also see him at work sometimes. My manager had given me permission to go to the back room and just get out of sight whenever he come in looking for me, which he had now done several times while I was at work. I caught him walking in once, scanning literally the entire store just to see if he could spot me. He didn't, so he just left. He also mentioned to me that he wanted to kidnap me, and told me that he just wanted to take me away and keep me to himself. I just remembered that when he said it, it looked like he wasn't hesitating, as if he was going to actually act out on it right away. I found this a little bit alarming, but I was too scared. I didn't know why. I guess I didn't realise how much of a danger I was in at the time, but it was odd. But I did play it cool. Now you might ask why I hadn't called the police at this point. Well, the police wouldn't have done anything since he had not caused any physical harm, so there would be no point in calling them. Also, I had no proof of these things happening or the things he said to me. Other than him showing up to my work a few times, he would come to my work often to look for me. If he didn't see me, he would just leave for work or whatever he did. Or if he hadn't seen me in a couple of days, he would bang on my door in the middle of the night to ask me to open the door. I of course would always ignore it. He had no way of reaching me anymore, because it was now clear to him that I was avoiding him. A couple of weeks passed and I awoken by the sound of a fire alarm going off. That's right, there was supposed to be another fire drill today. It was my day off. I quickly went to see if I still had the note, to see what time they were gonna enter the apartments. Maybe I still had some time to get ready and leave the apartment, since my landlord usually comes in with this guy to check the alarms. I couldn't find the note though. I got ready as fast as I could, and when I was about halfway done, I got this knock on my door. Oh, who is this? I thought. I opened the door, and there was a guy for the alarm and the landlord. They both walked in. The landlord didn't say a word to me. The guy checked the alarm and then said it was good. They both left. I felt relieved. That went well, right? Wrong. Not even a minute passed and I heard another guy knock at the door. Hey, it's me. Can you open up for a sec? I ignored it. The knocks then become even louder. Hey man, I know you're in there. Stop playing with me. I need to tell you something. Come on, open up. This continued for about 2 minutes when it was finally silent again. I had enough of this guy. I had to do something about this. That night, I was supposed to go to my friend's house to hang out with her, and also to return her laptop. She had given me it to reinstall Windows. I got ready and left my apartment around 11 PM. It was really nice out, and I walked over to her house. It was a long walk, but I really loved walking. I took the elevator down, and when the elevator opened, I saw him once again standing by the door. He hadn't really seen me yet, so I acted fast. Either get back into the elevator or sprint for the front door. In a split second, I went for the front doors, but sadly he noticed me. I heard heavy footsteps running behind. Before I go on with my story, I want to say that when you leave the front doors, you see a big parking lot. In order to leave the apartment complex, you need to walk around the building. So basically the front doors were pretty much the back of the building, and the back doors are the front. I know it's weird. Anyhow, when I got outside, I ran halfway around the building and looked behind me. There was no one there. I stopped running and started walking again, but something inside me told me to keep running. Little did I know, the reason why the footsteps behind me had stopped was because he had gone to the back doors to try and catch me there. When I got to the other side of the building, I saw that he made it halfway around the back side of the building. I started running again and he started running after me. He chased me for around 2 more blocks. We both would occasionally stop to catch our breaths. It was close to the main road when I stopped running. My lungs were burning. I couldn't run anymore. Whatever happens next, I had to fight. He caught on. Out of breath, he said to me, "Stop, man, stop, you're killing me. Stop doing this to me." I looked in shock. I didn't say a word, still trying to catch my breath. "Why are you doing this to me, man?" he said, letting out a small cry. For the first time, I saw a look of sadness mixed with anger. "Stop following me. What do you want?" "Please, don't go. Please come with me. Let's talk." "Talk about what?" He was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't care anymore. I was shaken and tired and just wanted to see my friend. I didn't even make out what he said because of adrenaline. I started walking again, turning around every 2 seconds to make sure he wasn't following me. He wasn't. He just watched me walk away. And that was the last I ever saw of him. My mum did a lot of drugs when I was young. She was always pretty open about it too. So drug use was a pretty normalized thing to my brain from a young age. Part of normalization occurred because my mum often took me with her on her drugs runs. The dealers were always nice to me. One guy was named PJ or DJ or something, I don't know. And he had a cool black light paintings and candle wax sculptures. Another guy was Don, and he had the biggest, bushiest beard that I had ever seen. It reminded me of a brunette Santa Claus trucker. And then there was Barbara and Sparky. Like the others, Barbara and Sparky were nice to me for the most part. Barbara was at least. Sparky usually just sat in the living room, watching movies on Cinemax or something in the dark. They were at least 20 years older than my mum, probably 30 years older. Whenever we went over, the routine was the same. My mum and Barbara would leave me in a room and they would go and get high. I was about 7 at the time, so I was too naive to understand how wrong this was. But the room they left me in had a TV, NES, and at least 50 or so games for it. I was in heaven. I played well-known games like Super Mario Bros. 3, Bubble, as well as some other games that I've kind of forgotten. Regardless, I had hours of free time to explore the largest NES library I'd ever seen. I was on cloud 9. Early on into our trips to Barbara and Sparky's, though my mum told me not to be alone with Sparky, I asked why and she hesitated. She ended up telling me that he doesn't like little kids and I was innocent enough to buy what she had just told me. Despite the warnings, I never noticed anything off about him. Like I said, he just watched movies in the dark all by himself. However, one night was a little bit different. I was playing games as usual when the door opened. In the doorway was Sparky, holding a small glass of dark liquid. I said hi, but he just stood in the doorway staring at me. It was uncomfortable, but I just discovered that they had the monsters in my pocket video game, so I turned it back on. I felt him staring at me for a few more moments before I turned around again. This time, he asked me what I was playing. I answered, and then we were back to silence and stares. He followed up by taking another swig of his drink and inching behind me. He put his hand on my shoulder and gave us a gentle squeeze. Not like he was trying to get my attention, but something more purposeful. I didn't know what to do at the time, but thankfully, almost as if summoned by Sparky touching me, my mum and Barbara appeared in the doorway, surprised and concerned that Sparky was in the room with me. They ushered him off, and the rest of the time at my mum's drug dealer's place was as normal as it could have ever been. I didn't know about weird men like this when I was that young, and I never realised how close I came to being abused. On another visit to Barbara's and Sparky's, I had been playing video games for longer than usual and I got hungry. I went into the kitchen and found nobody. I looked around for snacks on the counter but only found a mirror with lines of white powder and a very short straw next to it. This was a strange sight to me as 1, I had no idea what it was, 2, I never saw mirrors that small before, 3, I definitely hadn't seen straws that short. I stood there for a while looking at it, trying to make sense of it all when my mum came in behind me. She seemed very hurried though, and I didn't know why. It kind of concerned me a little bit. She seemed very off-put and got a glass of ice water. She told me to stay away from the white powder and go back to playing games. I was still hungry and she left so quickly that I wasn't able to even ask her about food, so I followed her. She went back into Barbara's and Sparky's bedroom where Barbara was. She looked like she was having a bad dream, but her eyes were wide open. She just seemed really gone. She was muttering something. Beth, we have to get ready. The Christmas man is coming. The Christmas man. It went on like that for a few minutes. As a young child, I thought she was being funny, so I laughed about it. My mum just grinned kind of awkwardly, almost as if she was hiding her true emotions, gave Barbara the water and told me that I had to leave because she wasn't feeling well. On the way home, I asked her about the Christmas man. I asked if it was Santa Claus, and if it was, why was she talking about him in the summer? I don't remember exactly what she had told me, but she probably dodged the questions or spoon-fed me something innocent that a child would believe. My mum ended up breaking ties with them, and not long after that, I never saw either of them again. I never knew why, but I wasn't sad to never see them again. I was sad about never playing the video games again though. This happened one nice spring day back in 2013. I was about 17 years old at the time and I'd skipped school. I was just lying in bed, doing whatever I used to do on my laptop, when my younger brother, who was 12 at the time, knocked on my bedroom window saying that there was a man in our backyard. It was still early in the day and still light outside, so I initially wasn't very worried. Our neighbours consisted of old people and families with kids. I went upstairs and met with my brother in the living room. He told me that the man was still outside in our backyard with his beagle puppy. I peeked through the blinds on our floor from the ceiling windows and, surely enough, there was a man walking around with his puppy on a leash. He looked like your average suburban dad out for a walk, except his dog's eyes were lost and almost looked like he was dead inside. I stood there watching him for a little while until I see him walking slowly towards the house and up the stairs to where the back entrance is. He was now on the porch, just meters away from where I'm standing, hiding out of sight indoors. He slowly walked towards the door, looked through the window, and then proceeded to walk back down in the yard. I didn't know what to do at this point, and me and my brother were starting to get scared. Some minutes passed and I gathered my courage and went out to ask him what he was doing. At this point I should mention that my sister, 8 years younger, had just gotten her second batch of rabbits, tiny baby rabbits that she loved more than anything. I say second batch because the first two vanished one day, leaving the door to the cage open. We figured that some neighbourhood kids went to visit the rabbits and left the door unhinged, thus letting the rabbits get out. We later found one of them, missing several body parts, lying in the bottom of our neighbour's basement stairs. Anyway, I opened the door, adrenaline pumping, and asked calmly if the man needed some help and what he was doing in our backyard. He calmly explained that he was just training his puppy and that it was a bird and rabbit hunting dog. As confused as I was, I just stared at him and didn't say anything in response. This is when I saw his dog stepping proudly out from behind the trees with one of our baby rabbits just hanging dead from its mouth. I didn't expect this. I had no idea how to react, and I just said okay and hurried inside to tell my brother. When I got inside, he told me to call our dad, and he immediately called our neighbours to come and help us. We waited inside for about 10 minutes, keeping our eyes on the man as he calmly walked around in our yard with his dog and the rabbit. When our neighbours finally come, he tried to escape through the back entrance. Our neighbours chased him around the neighbourhood for a little until they finally caught up with him. The police were called and we found out that he had been training his dog all around the area for a couple of weeks, and a lot of rabbits were missing. He was finally committed into a psychiatric ward by his wife after some weeks. He got out about a year or so later, and my mum sees him around quite a lot. My story only may be short and not necessarily have anything too creepy happen in it, but is nonetheless terrifying. When I was younger, I always used to play out with my friend around the back of where he lived because it was just so great. It was almost like a mini jungle, well, more like a swamp than anything. Regardless, there was this massive tree that we loved to climb. My friend had told me that it probably wasn't a good idea to go too close to the edge of the swamp area, but I went there regardless. I wanted to see how far out I could go, and I began proceeding, walking through this thick grass area. My friend was up the tree guiding me. He said that he couldn't see all the way to the back, but I should just see where it goes, and I began doing so. I began to by simply throwing a basket I had directly in front of me, just so I could make sure that the ground hadn't gone too swampy. I continued doing so for a while, and I got this really strange feeling. I don't know what it was, something just hit me. I just didn't feel safe all of a sudden. "You gotta come back now," my friend said to me. "I can't see any further." "Yeah, let me just go a little bit more, dude. I've never got this far." "Sure." And I continued on further and just shook it off as me being paranoid. I threw the basket once again and, well, that was the last I'd ever seen or heard of it. I had no idea what could have happened. It was like it had just vanished. I couldn't see over the grass, and I just decided it would be time to head back. As I did, my friend was still waiting for me up the tree, so I began to climb up and meet him. I had to climb up higher because there wasn't enough room on the branch that he was sitting on. As I did, I got the shock of my life. There was a huge cliff that led into a massive quarry that must have been at least 60 feet down in an almost sheer drop. I've never been so scared from seeing something inanimate before. It just terrifies me to think that if I'd have gone one step further, I would have almost definitely been killed.
My let's not meet encounter took place earlier this week in a beach town in Central Florida. This is my first, and hopefully last, story here. I surf, and it's a big part of my life, and if I go a few days without getting in the water, I go through withdrawals. The last year, my work schedule has changed so that I am working a lot of late evenings, usually getting home around 4 a.m. I live on the beach and I have gotten myself into a routine of coming home, grabbing my bowl of cereal, and then getting my board and heading to the beach around 4:30 a.m. It's still dark at this time, but most nights the moonlight and the glow from the pier is enough to illuminate the waves. I usually surf for a couple of hours, catch the sunrise, and then head home to sleep. Most days, the beach is empty for the first hour or so, with the exceptions of an occasional jogger. Now, Monday starts off with the usual routine. I usually stay pretty close to the pier, but the rip current was strong, and on days like that, I just drifted with the current until I hit a point about half a mile down from the pier. I used to use particular house lights as my marker, and then paddle back to the shore and walk back to my starting point. As I was waiting for the next set of lights, I noticed the outline of someone standing on the shore, watching me. I couldn't really make out any details, and just that there was indeed a person there. I really didn't think twice about it, as it's not uncommon for people to stop and watch for a few minutes. Now, I continued surfing and put him out of mind. Approximately 45 minutes later, the current had pulled me to my marker, and so I start paddling into shore. It's then I notice what I think is the same person from earlier still lingering, which is kinda odd because I've been out there a while and drifted a far distance. He apparently followed along the whole time on the shore. I reach the shore and throw a quick glance his direction. He's a husky white male about 40-ish, wearing some shorts and a ratty-looking red 49ers shirt for what I could see. He's about 15 feet behind in the shadows. And I started walking briskly back up to the beach towards the pier and my beach access ramp. He follows along, always keeping the same distance even though I speed up and slow down a few times just to see how he reacts. Nothing is said, but it's clear he's following me at this point. I get to the beach access ramp and turn around and he's gone. He must have ducked behind one of the hotel stairways is all I could think, but I wasn't going to go look for him and just chalked it up to one of the local homeless or eccentrics in the area attracts, and I didn't really give it any more thought. End of the story, right? Not exactly. Now, fast forward to the next morning. It's overcast and a little darker out. I'm in my routine and I'm back at the beach about 4:45 a.m. The swells were light and I was getting closer to the pier, just floating as there's no rip current this day. I started to get that you're being watched feeling, and I can't seem to shake it. Now, looking around, the beach and the pier are deserted except I notice what looks like a lone fisherman standing above me on the pier, but I can't really make out any of his details as he was backlit and I could only see his outline. I did not notice a pole, he was just standing there. I get in a wave and as I glance back, it looks like the guy threw something into the water at that moment. I didn't think anything of it until a few minutes later. I glance back and it appears he just tossed something else into the water. As I look back his direction, he stops what he's doing and just stands there motionless. So now I'm curious, what's up? The sky was lighting up a bit and the next set of waves roll through. This time as I start paddling into the wave, I'm watching him over my shoulder. As soon as it looks like my attention is elsewhere, the man tosses in several more objects, yet stops as soon as I am turned back towards him. Now, it finally dawns on me what he's doing. He's chumming in the water by tossing chunks of meat into the sea around me. You chum to attract fish. Now, the bigger the pieces you use, the bigger fish you attract, and these were not small. This guy has no fishing gear with him and is attempting to attract sharks right to where I am, in the dark water maybe 150 yards offshore. Now, I am instantly a mix of fear and little anger. I start paddling hard but steadily into shore, and he then drops all pretense and dumps an entire bucket over the side of the pier while starting to walk back towards the shore end. As I step out of the water, I start to move towards the pier stairwell, intent on confronting him. I'm no punk, and this guy just put me into a very dangerous situation. This guy is coming down the pier in my direction as well, and this is when I finally get a decent look at the guy. He appears a little heavyset. He's wearing a red t-shirt, a red 49ers shirt, and the same guy from the day before. At this moment, a strong feeling comes over me, and I need to get out of there instead of escalating the situation further. I am not the toughest guy on the block, but I have had my share of scraps and generally don't shy away from confrontations, but something inside of me felt very, very wrong. I changed directions and began walking towards the beach access ramp and towards home. He comes down the stairs and continues to follow me at about a 10 feet distance. The only sounds are the waves crashing on the shore as we play out a low-speed pursuit across the sand. I get to the beach ramp and start to go up. Now, this ramp has a 90-degree turn about halfway, and that leads to a 30 or so yard long walkway between two condo buildings to access the beach/street. Once I hit the 90-degree turn, and I am out of his immediate line of sight, I book it and double time it to the far end of the hallway, putting some distance between us. I'm still going back and forth in my head if I should confront him or follow my gut and just walk away. I stop and wait at the far end of the walk. As he turns the corner, at the 90-degree bend, he just stops. We just stare at each other in silence. After what felt like ages, but probably was only 20 seconds, he reached into his waistband and draws out what I take to be a fillet knife. I can see its reflection in the light. He waves at me with his other hand, lets out a sharp laugh and quickly spins on his heels, disappearing back down the ramp and out of sight. I decided I had had enough and taken a slightly roundabout route to make sure he wasn't telling me still. I headed home. I haven't seen him since, but I also haven't been back to the beach in a few days. So the guy who tried to turn me into shark bait, let's not meet again.
This is more my father's story, but I feel that it fits here. As a child, this traumatized me pretty badly. I had months of nightmares, sleepless nights, paranoia about myself and my family being killed as a result. Before I recount the actual story, I need to provide a little background information. My mother is English, but my father is from a different foreign country in Europe. They met when she was over here on holiday in 1980 and had a long-distance relationship until they finally got married in 1984. My mother moved here after they were married. One of my father's friends and workmates also ended up marrying an English woman in 1985. He moved over there and they live in Gloucester, and all of this is relevant to my story. A couple of weeks before Christmas in December 1991, my father decided to go out to England in order to buy some things he required for his work. they were much cheaper at this specific warehouse than he could possibly get over here. My mother and I initially were keen to go with him, as at the time, a man who shot his brother-in-law and a family friend of theirs in the local area was at large, and both of us were very afraid that he'd break into our house while my father was away. But I couldn't take off any more time from school, so we had to stay behind. My grandma, who lived in Wales, was coming to spend Christmas with us, so my father decided to go over to England, buy the things he needed, stay for a couple of days with his friend and his wife, then go down to Wales and to the airport with my grandma so they could travel here on the same day. So that's what he did, and everything went normally. Nothing terrible happened while he was away. In fact, nothing happened at all until 1994, when my parents and myself were visiting my mother's family in Wales, and Frederic's face flashed across the screen during the evening news. My father swore loudly in his first language and then asked my grandma if he could use her phone at some point. He called Bert, his friend that I spoke about earlier. Then, when he hung up, explained everything to us. Frederick West and his wife Rosemary were convicted of raping and killing multiple young women, including their own 16-year-old daughter who disappeared in 1987. The majority of the murders occurred between May 1973 and August 1979 in their homes at 25 Midland Road and later 25 Cornwall Street in Gloucester, with many bodies buried near to their homes. They were also Bert's neighbours from across the road. On my father's final night in Gloucester, back in December 1991, he and Bert had been going out for something to eat, and on their way back met Frederick in the street, who was going for a pint at a nearby public house. My father and Bert wound up having a drink with Frederick before they went to eat at a nearby restaurant. So Bert and his wife had been living across the street from two of England's most infamous murderers. Bert was on the friendly terms with him at this point. His wife often did cleaning jobs in neighbours' homes. One of those houses she did clean was at 25 Cornwall Street. I shudder to think what could have happened to her being in that house. It still gives me chills to this day when I remember how he almost went with my father. Would Frederick have tried to do something to me or my mother if I had been there? I was just a little girl at the time. It terrifies me to even imagine what might have gone through his head if I had been with my father. Another thing that scares me to this day about all of this is how this guy seemed completely normal to Bert for all those years, even during the time that he raped, killed and buried his own teenage daughter under the patio of his house. My father too said, though he only spoke with him very briefly, Frederick didn't come across as menacing at all. It actually strikes me as ironic when I think back at it, how afraid of that shooter guy my mother and I were, and thought we'd be safer with my father who, while on holiday, crossed paths with a serial killer without even knowing it. Needless to say, I'm so thankful that neither me nor my mother did ever meet Frederick. This is a story what happened to my youngest brother and I, who I am very close to. 5 months ago he started working with me at the gym doing weights and then walking 6 miles around the town we live in every day. Slowly, I began losing weight and feeling much better about myself. I just brought myself a new running outfit and put it on, along with my new running shoes, and went out for a 6-mile jog. My brother lives with me and he was very slow at getting ready. I was giving him a hard time, as older sisters sometimes do, but I told him to take his time and catch up with me on the trail. Our city has this designated jogging path on the side of the road that we usually follow all the way around our town, so I took off. I wear a backpack that wraps around my chest and I put my water bottle in it, an iPhone, etc. I put in my earbuds and hit Spotify with my workout list and kept on jogging. Keep in mind this was during the day. In fact, it was around 8:45 AM. We live in probably one of the safest towns in America. although it's about 35 minutes away from a major city. I like to run around as I'm walking and see if my brother is following me. I like to turn around and see if my brother is following me. I turn back and then I see him a good ways away. I wave and make a funny face to him as I see him wave back, and I turn around and keep going. I text him that, "You're so slow, keep moving." It's important to know that my brother wears the same outfit all the time. He has 2 exact copies of his outfit and interchanges them, but they look exactly the same. It was just a grey hoodie, grey sweats, and an orange beanie that he wears under his hoodie. So I turn back when I get to the elementary school we always pass, and I see he's gaining on me. So I playfully flip him off and start jogging as he waves back and does a funny dance. Suddenly though, my phone rings and it's my brother. I pick up and he tells me, "I got your message and I'm just leaving the house now." My throat went all dry. I argue that it can't be because I see him behind me, and the person I assume was him is literally behind me. I stammer out, "Okay, see you soon," and hang up because honestly, I was so shook my mind shut down. I look at the person that I assumed was my brother and I notice how close he's getting to me. He's heavier than my brother. He is next to me now and starts walking in front of me. I yell out, "Sorry I flipped you off," thinking, okay, it's just a coincidence he's wearing exactly the same clothes as my brother. He turns back and I see an older guy, maybe in his 60s or 50s. I recognize him from the gym. He tells me he's seen me walking around town with my brother and it looks so fun that he thought he'd start doing it too. Meanwhile, he's staring so hard at me I feel violated. He then goes on telling me that my body is really good looking and other weird stuff like that. And he starts to get really creepy. Thankfully though, my brother jogs fast and catches up with us. The guy started taking off after telling me he would definitely see me around. And by the time my brother made it to where I was, the guy was across the street, literally booking it. My brother told me that it was just most likely a chance coincidence. I disagree. He was wearing the exact same outfit as my brother, even down to the orange beanie. Also, if he was just walking, then why did he wave back at me? It just doesn't add up. It just really scares me. Then on Sunday night when we returned from dinner at my mum's, we found roses and a card at our door. It says, "Thanks for walking with me." I just pray that all of this is gonna stop. So some background information. I am female and I was about 16 at the time of this event. I was driving home late one night from a friend's house. It was about 1 AM, and since he lived on the other side of town, I had to take some windy, relatively isolated back roads to my house. It was really dark out that night and I was blasting the music, and I wasn't really paying much attention to the road. There were no other cars out this late, so I had the road to myself. It was a really narrow road too, so I was sort of glad that there was no one else in the incoming lane. The houses that were nearby were set far off the road and their lights were off. All this was normal. There was nothing to do in my town at night anyways, so it was always pretty quiet past 9 PM. Then I saw something that was really out of place. Up ahead, there were 3 homeless people. 2 men and a woman were on the side of the road. I didn't get a super great look at them, but if I had to guess, they were probably in their 40s. Now, I'm calling them homeless, but I'm not really sure if they actually were. They definitely looked it though. Their clothes were filthy, old and ripped, and none of them looked like they had showered recently. I immediately turned off my music and focused on the road ahead. I remember thinking, what the hell are these people doing here? We're about an hour's drive from any major city, so I wondered why they travelled all the way here. We haven't had any sort of resources for homeless people in ages, so this was not a good place to go begging. as most of the people here were pretty stingy. I was confused. I slowed down slightly as I approached them. They were dangerously near the side of the road and I didn't want to accidentally hit one of them. As I get closer, I think I see one of them moving out onto the road. It's still dark though and my car has weak headlights, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I flicker on my high beam so I can see what's happening. What I saw almost gave me a panic attack. They had spread out across the narrow road, completely blocking my path. There was no way that I could have swerved without hitting at least one of them. They stood facing me, squinting. They weren't smiling creepily and they weren't carrying any weapons that I could see, but I was still majorly freaked out by this. Fear shot through me. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to slow down or stop, because I was pretty sure that that's exactly what they wanted me to do. I didn't know what they wanted, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. Some of you may call me stupid, thoughtless or mean for what I did next, but it was the only option that I had. I kept going in my lane straight at the man who was blocking the part of the road in front of me. I did not slow down or speed up, I just kept my speed at nearly 20. I didn't stop. I kept telling myself, he'll move out of the way, he's not going to stand there and get hit. They're bluffing. As I approached, he still did not budge. Not one of them did. I started to get nervous that they really weren't going to move out of the way. I still kept going. Eventually, at the last possible second though, the man jumped out of the way and I was able to get past their blockade. I kept driving and never looked back. I was driving back to my college from my family's house after Thanksgiving break. I was travelling through a rural area in the Midwest and I suddenly had the urge to pee badly. I was reading all the road signs I come across to see if there was a nearby town that I could stop at to find a gas station or something. Unfortunately for me, the nearest town was 30-ish miles away and I had to pee so badly, it was unbearable. I have finally made the decision to get off at the next exit that I found, even though that I wasn't sure if the road led to any towns. Shortly after I pulled off on the next exit, I come across a gravel road. I thought it was perfect because I didn't want to get in trouble for exposing myself in front of anybody. It was a very private road. So, just so you are all fully aware, I am female. It's very difficult for females to pee on the side of the road. I thought the best course of action would be to wait a while to make sure it is clear, then go about my business. And that's just what I did. After I'd finished, I was starting my car and getting ready to turn back around the way that I come and saw a red car speeding down the road that I was on. It startled me, but they drove right past and I thought to myself, this must be locals just messing around. I started to drive off when I saw a dingy, rusted red pickup truck coming down the road after the car. They also drove past me. As they passed me though, I saw two male passengers who were staring straight at me. This freaked me out, but I told myself that this was all the more reason to get a move on. I still kept my eye on the pickup truck though, and I saw them turning around coming straight at me. This freaked me out so much, I decided the best course of action would be to drive in their direction, continuing down the gravel road as opposed to turning around, giving them an opportunity to chase me. I drove right by them again and saw that they were grinning at me. I was so scared I hit the gas, which on gravel road doesn't do much good. I finally got a grip on the road and headed along this gravel road. I looked in my rear view mirror and they were following me again. I was freaked out, my hands were shaking, my foot was flooring the accelerator and I reached for my phone. Now, I'm not the person who would normally call 911 in just any situation. In fact, I was scared to call them because I was afraid I was just being paranoid. But as I looked in my rear view mirror again, I saw them gaining at me. I called the police. When I called the police, the operator picked up and I explained to her what was happening. During this call, the men in the pickup truck were so close that I could see their front tyres. I was sliding all around the gravel road trying to stay on the phone with the operator. She gave me directions to the nearest town several miles away. They followed me the entire way there, all the way until I finally reached the police station. I saw them turn around very quickly because they knew I was out of their reach. I definitely learned my lesson from this, and I think that I'm going to stick to peeing in public restrooms from now on.
This took place in 2013. After graduating college, I was about to embark on a summer-long road trip that I had been planning for over a year. And at the last minute, my friends bailed on me. But being the adventurous sort, I decided to not let it stop me, so I packed up my guitar and I went on my way. This is how I came to be a 26-year-old girl, road tripping it across the country alone. Since I was very poor, I was camping in national forests or rest stops and living out in a borrowed minivan. All was going well and I was having the time of my life. However, a few months in, I had made it to California and I was traveling around the Vallejo, San Francisco area. One night I was looking for a new place to camp out and found myself on a Bay Area highway route with unusual detours. Because the detours were confusing and poorly marked, I found myself driving through a small town, uncertain if I was still following the detour or not. It was about 9 o'clock at night, but since it was a small town, no one seemed to be out and about to ask directions from. I tried using my phone, but the signal was crummy and my phone sucked to begin with. Figures. I mumbled and threw my useless phone on the passenger seat. It seemed I was getting out of town and into some kind of warehouse district, but I could see the highway up ahead in the distance, so I decided to head towards it. The single road I was on led me through rows of factories, but there was nowhere to turn off. I still was heading towards the highway, so I kept on. I passed a large, old car. Now, I'm terrible at identifying cars, but it's kind of what you would call a boat. Very cool, classic car kind of thing in the parking lot of the factory. When I passed, the car's headlights were switched on and it pulled out behind me. I honestly didn't think anything of it. I figured the poor guy was lost too and followed me thinking I knew where I was going. I continued on for a while with him still behind me, and I finally reached where the highway passes over the road. Much to my dismay, I turned a corner into a gravel lot of sorts that dead-ended into a fence right underneath the highway. There was no way to get out onto the highway. Now this is where it gets a bit creepy. The gravel area was about 2 lanes wide, but the large car pulled up behind me directly in the middle, so I couldn't get around him. This raised an immediate red flag, but I tried to convince myself that he was just a lost guy and his parking in an inconvenient way was merely an accident. However, I didn't want to get out of the van and ask him to move, so I began trying to make up a plan. I pulled a little further towards the fence, as if trying to make a U-turn. I already knew there would not be enough room, but what he did next frightened me. As the nose of my van came up against the fence, he pulled up to the fence too, at an angle, blocking me from going any further. Now, I knew he was up to no good, and now I could get a pretty good look at him, as we were very, very close to each other. He had a baseball cap on, and a crazy ZZ Top style beard. To give you a picture, I was in the right of 2 lanes, with the crazy man blocking me, and to my left and to my right was 3 cement pylons. These are what you usually see blocking off highway construction. They were running the length of the lot, with a car width, Not length, but the width of the front of the car, in between them. Here is where I take a bow to the gods of dumb luck, as I saw something in those pylons that most would not. You see, prior to this road trip, I had spent 8 years as a bus driver, and much of the time was spent training new drivers. One of the maneuvers on the commercial driving test in my state was called the backwards serpentine. To pass, you had to back the bus through 3 cones positioned in a straight line. Since the cones are only a bus width apart, not length, you must turn exactly the right time to master this move. It was very similar to what I was looking at now, although doing it with cones is a little different than cement blocks. Because if I crashed into the cement block, I would certainly not be able to drive out of there, and who knows what this man had in mind. I gunned it in reverse, keeping the maneuver I had taught so many times in my head. And keep in mind, driving tests are graded on accuracy, not speed. So this was the first time I had ever had to do this fast. By the time I had made it around the second pylon, he realized what was happening, but because he had a big car and was pushed up against the fence, it took him a few wiggles to get turned around. By then I had completed my maneuver and I took off back down the road. He followed, but there was no way to know if he was chasing me or fleeing, as there was only one way in or out of this place. I was scared because I was still lost, and presumably this man knew the area if he had picked this spot to wait for lost tourists, so I wasn't out of the woods yet. Pumped, full of adrenaline, I screamed out the open window, "You picked the wrong girl to play driving games with, you big dummy!" And then I heard a tiny robotic voice say, "No results for driving games, big dummy." I was confused for a minute, then remembered the useless navigator on my phone, which I had discarded. It had been flung to the floor of the passenger side during the ordeal, and I wasn't about to stop to grab it. So I just began screaming, "I-80!" at the top of my lungs. Finally, the phone heard me and gave me directions back to the highway. I drove around the area highways, stopping at gas stations to observe the other vehicles getting off at least a few times to make sure I wasn't being followed. Luckily, it was a pretty distinctive car, but still I did this for over an hour before I felt safe enough to camp out. So, creepy bearded man, let's not meet.
About a year ago, I was working at this restaurant which has a drive-through where I still currently work. It was a semi-regular drive-through attachment. Well, this guy come through one day, and upon opening the window, I told him that his total was, and the exact number, and he was staring like he could see through my soul. He hands me his money, and right as I grab it, he takes hold of my hand and doesn't let go. He told me I had pretty hands and then asked for my number. I told him no and that I had a boyfriend, which I didn't at the time, and quickly pulled my hands away. My manager quickly took over after that. After that, he came through 3 or 4 times a day and asked if I was there, and eventually figured out my schedule. He knew what my car looked like and what time I got off. He even had his mother come through, and she began calling me her daughter-in-law and asked me when me and her son were going to get married. She even got angry when I told her that I was seeing somebody already. It ended up that I had to be moved from dealing with customers because my stalker even walked to and from my car, and he was often spotted by my co-workers and managers sitting outside waiting for me. I eventually quit for a while and come back to see that he hasn't returned, at least yet. When I was 16, I was required to get a job. Most of my high school life was playing World of War, and my mum had enough of me lazing around the house. She was a manager at a clothing store where I was guaranteed a job no matter what. But of course I didn't want to work there. Clothing retail? Gross. However, in the end, nowhere else was going to hire me, so I didn't have a choice. And given that I didn't have a car, my option was only this one. Now, since the Sears was in the mall, the employees saw a fair share of creeps and weird people in the evenings. On my first Black Friday there, someone was stabbed in the parking lot. The elevators would open and close for literally no reason, and the people that worked upstairs swear they could hear children laughing in the fitting room when the store was closed. Anyways, to the actual story. Like I said, my mum was a manager at the time. I didn't work in her department, but when she was opening, I was forced to come with her to replace the sales signs on the floor, preparing for the store to open. This was usually around 7 AM. The only other people in the store at this time were janitors. Now, our janitors weren't fluent in English and they come from a foreign country and were hired to clean up every morning. In the family was a sweeter old lady that I called Loa. Loa could only speak very few sentences in English, but while I was there early in the morning, she'd teach me some Spanish. Mostly small phrases and words, but it was a fun time killer. She would also give out small candies from her apron while cleaning. Her job was to clean the restrooms from the night before, which, trust me, was always disgusting. However, there was one morning when the restrooms reached a whole new level of creepiness. I went into work with my mum at 7 AM replacing signs in the home fashion department on the second floor, while Loa cleaned the restrooms downstairs. Now, it's a normal morning so far. I'm yawning and moaning to myself that it sucks having to be here so early. I suddenly heard Loa scream though, not just any scream. A piercing loud scream that leaves me jumping so high that I nearly screamed in return. Rushing downstairs, I passed the restroom where Loa had been cleaning and I saw her running out. I saw a true look of horror on her face, one that I've never seen before. My mum, who had been running to see what the fuss was about, also saw Loa's face and my confused worries and scared expression, and then walks into the bathroom. My first thought was that somebody had left a mess there. When my mum finally comes out of the toilet blocks, she had a really foul face. "We're calling the cops," she said to me before rushing to her phone. By now I'm extremely uneased. Did somebody get murdered? I peek into the restroom where I hear very quiet, very eerie whispering. What I see next sends chills to my bone. Sitting on the toilet stool, wide open, was a lady. The lady looked very, very odd. Hair was messy. Skin was really odd. It was just too pale. Her face was empty. She's staring right through me and her lips are moving. She's muttering? No, chanting. Finally, I step out of the restroom and by this time, my mum is back and the cops are on their way. Loa is still reasonably freaked out, crouched down near a shelf praying in her native language. The cops finally escort the lady out of the restrooms and she continued chanting, and I talked to one of the officers. And you know what the most disturbing part of all of this is? The Sears had a security system, and a pretty good one at that. Sensors throughout the entire store even. Once the store was closed, it would have been impossible to get in without setting them off. The cops would be instantly notified if anybody tried to break in here. But the alarms were never set off that night, and upon close inspection was revealed to still be fully functioning. But the security system had never sensed anyone in the store and the cops were never alerted. The chanting lady had been sitting on the toilet, muttering in darkness, not moving a single inch for 9 hours straight. We never figured out why or even how, but what I do know is it scared the hell out of me. My mum had asked the security officers about a tape to the cameras once they come in, and after reviewing it, discovered that the camera showed the entrance to the bathroom had been broken. Laura quit a couple of days after and I never saw her again. I'm now 22 and live in a different city, working at a different job, but I rarely use the restrooms in public anymore, and I am still kind of a little scared that I'm gonna hear her chanting again. I'm a woman in my mid-20s, and I live in a medium-sized city, at the edge of a mostly yuppie neighbourhood that is close enough to downtown to still be considered urban, but still relatively quiet and considered safe by most people who live in my city. We've had our fair share of car break-ins, I guess, but that's the usual extent of which our crimes are reported. In addition to my full-time office job, I work part-time at a high-end restaurant. After work around 11 PM on Sunday, I really don't feel like cooking and was dreaming of cold margarita, so I went to the bar across the street for a late dinner by myself, still decked out in my nice work clothes. This bar is somewhat of a dive, and I always forget that they host punk shows in the back room on Sunday nights, which typically draws a sizable crowd. The commotion and swarm of rowdy drunk people didn't bother me much until I felt someone bump my bar stool towards the end of my meal. I looked back and a guy maybe 10 or 15 years older than me was pressed up against the back of my seat and smiling at me. I brushed him off as a drunk weirdo trying to get the bartender's attention, until I felt his hand gently rubbing my back for a few seconds. I looked back at him, obviously confused, and he smiled again. I had just finished closing out my tab, so a little flustered, I jumped down from my bar stool and stumbled a bit since I was trying to move so quickly. "Are you okay?" he said to me. He was very tall and slender, wearing a tattered red plaid jacket and a cowboy hat. "No, you seem drunk. Are you okay?" "Yeah, why? I only had 2 drinks. I'm not drunk or anything. The bar stool is just quite high and I'm short." No, you seem drunk. It's just that you look so sweet and innocent, and I want to make sure that you're okay and feel safe here." I kind of laughed to myself because even though I looked out of place here, I have lived across from this place for years and have been coming here countless times. "Yeah, I'm totally fine. Do you want me to walk you back to your car to make sure you're okay?" By at this point, I was beyond tired of this guy's unwanted attention because I'm used to being approached by creeps when alone in public. What I said to him next was a huge mistake. I'm never going to make this mistake again, I can tell you. "Actually, I live just across the street. Really, I'm fine." He grabbed my shoulder gently. He looked me in the eyes with a huge grin on his face and pulled me into a bear hug even though I resisted. "I just want to make sure you're protected." "Whatever, dude. Good night." My 1-minute walk home was uneventful and I forgot about him for the next few days. There are a few bars on my block and 2 convenience stores, so the area experiences some pretty high foot traffic and is well lit until about 1 or 2 AM, which makes my story even more alarming as no one on the street saw. I live alone on the 2nd floor of a duplex. My bedroom faces the front street and there is a balcony attached to it. The only way to access this balcony is to either walk through my bedroom or somehow climb up there from the street, which would take a certain amount of dedication and athleticism. There's a big window from my bed where I have a full view of my balcony. Since I'm not on the ground floor and I have trees blocking my window from neighbours across the street, I usually leave the blinds open so the sun wakes me up in the morning. 2 days after the encounter in the bar, I was sitting on my bed reading a little after midnight. Thank goodness I didn't have music playing for once because I heard the noise outside on the balcony. First a muffled thump, then some faint creaking footsteps. I whipped my head around to look out of the window, and there he was standing at the edge of my balcony, about 6 feet from my window. smiling and waving at me like he was just dropping by to say hello to an old friend. Naturally, I had lost it and booked it in the opposite direction out of my back door. I've experienced a home invasion before, so I was on autopilot and called the police. They showed up within 5 minutes, but he was gone. The officer told me a bunch of things that didn't need repeating. To lock my doors, windows, keep my pepper spray by my bed or in my purse, and for God's sake, stop telling strangers where I live. If I ever saw this guy again, I was to immediately call the police again. Since then, I've had a million horrible thoughts about what could have hypothetically happened to me, and might have actually happened to me in the following days, months, years. Leading up to this without my knowledge, if I had been asleep, for example, or had not heard him out there, he could have easily broke my bedroom window and climbed right in. If he had a gun, he could have shot me through the window at pretty close range, and for all I know, that night at the bar was not the first time he had seen me. And that night on my balcony probably wasn't the first time that he gotten up there. It goes without saying I keep my blinds closed, and I'm always very cautious to make sure that I've locked everything. I even double check it now. I just hate what could have happened to me and how stupid I was. I just pray that I'm never going to see him again and that he never ventures back up onto my balcony at night time. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a house that sat directly across the school I attended. However, there was about a half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because it was so straightforward. My mother informed me that she and her siblings walked through the woods to school when they were younger, so it felt natural and safe for her to let me do so. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school all on my own, and I felt pretty at home in them woods as I had been raised around them literally. The walk was pretty direct, with very little issues aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem. It was the fact that on each side there was a steep bank that had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. It had rained the days before, so my steps, which I normally followed, were fairly silent, and it turns out that might have just saved my life. It at least saved me from something terrible, that is. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for my part in it. I was doing the supernova section and wasn't feeling very ready to make my speech in front of everyone explaining it. Anyway, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slightly wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of to pull myself up with. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I could climb up to the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I heard it again. I did. I heard a couple of boys talking, getting closer to me. I smashed myself up against the bank and listened for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me that I should stay that way and stay away from them. Something was just wrong. The boys came so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash, and as luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I listened to them talk. Yeah, she comes through here all the time. She could be coming round here any minute. My heart sunk. I was the only person that walked this trail to and from school, and they were in my direct path. This isn't to say that no one else was ever in the woods, but in all the time I used this trail, I never saw another person. To get to the woods from my house, I had to cross the road and walk along a small flat area that had no trees, and from the school side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anyone from either side could have easily seen me going in or out of the woods. I stood plastered to that wall of mud, waiting for them to catch me. I just didn't know what to do. I was terrified. My heart seemed to be beating so loud that I almost thought they were going to hear me. But they just walked around a little bit, smoked a couple of cigarettes, and started getting frustrated. "Where is she, man? You said she'd be here. So where is she?" "Maybe she's not coming to school today. Anyway, we gotta get out of here, we're gonna miss our bus." The high schoolers then caught their bus to the high school at the elementary place. This told me two things. One, they were obviously in high school, so much older than me at the time. And two, they had some seriously bad intentions towards me.
This took place when I was, I think, around 7 or 8, and so my brother must have been about 12 or 13 when this happened. Since my brother was now considered a teenager, my dad figured it'd be safe to stop asking my grandma to pick my brother and I up after school, because he couldn't do it since he was working. He was an extremely hard-working single father. Anyway, so my brother and I started walking home alone after school after getting off the bus. It was only like a 2-minute walk back to our place from the bus stop. Shortly after, a middle-aged man with the creepiest freaking vibes started showing up across the street from our house, and he would just stare. Mainly, he wore this beat-up, extremely dirty and vibrant jumpsuit. Like, extremely vibrant. Only reason I saw him was because of the freaking jumpsuit. That looked like it belonged in the 80s. Now, he wouldn't do anything. He'd just stare at our house from across the street. He'd usually appear 5 minutes after we got home, and then he'd leave about 5 to 10 minutes before my dad got home. At first, I thought he was just a strange new neighbor. It wasn't uncommon in my area for creepy old men, pedophilic construction workers, and drunk college students to lurk around town. It was about all my dad could afford at the time. After a while, though, I got a bad feeling that he wasn't a neighbor. He grew somewhat ballsy. At this point, he had been openly observing us for about half a year. It soon escalated from him just staring at us when we got home, to him physically waiting at my brother and I's bus stop. One, I already hated going home after school, and now this creep is practically unavoidable. I was a bundle of nerves, and so was my brother. When we got off the bus and saw the guy standing there, staring at us, I immediately hated it. My scaredy-cat-o-meter was finally off the dang charts that I was begging my brother to call the police. Please. Instead, he grabbed the metal baseball bat that was next to the door and told me that if anyone besides our dad walked through that door, that he'd kill them. I was so mad at him for weeks after that, but looking back now, I kind of extremely admire my prepubescent brother who would be willing to do anything to protect his little sister. That night, we finally told our dad about our daily evening visitor. He was furious, but also sad that his kids didn't tell him sooner. He felt like it was somehow our fault that this man was following us. So we figured that my brother and I would get in trouble for the man's actions. A creepy old man had been stalking his kids for nearly a year without his knowledge. He was devastated. I sympathize with him now. My dad talked to the woman who waited at the bus stop for her son and explained the situation to her. She had thought that the man was someone who had asked to watch us since she noticed our grandma no longer picked us up. After my dad talked to the woman, my brother and I never saw our stalker again. Years later, I found out that the woman, while waiting for her son to get dropped off by the bus, noticed the creep, and in the same jumpsuit. She walked right up to his face and told him, "If you don't leave those poor kids alone, I won't even call the cops. I'll take matters into my own hands and beat the living heck out of you. I never want to see your face around here again." She was a tough, mean-looking lady, but a huge softie with the biggest heart ever. Anyway, she was mean enough looking that the guy never looked outside our home and bus stop again. Not sure if this would serve as any significance to you guys, but my upstairs neighbor later claimed that they used to see him go dumpster diving down the street from our home. So, old dude with the creepiest stare I've ever seen, let's not meet again.